Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm Christopher and this is Challenger Tabletop. Another painting stream today. I'm going to be painting a Genestealer Cults model again, and today it's a Brood Brothers Astropath. We'll take a look at the model in a moment. And the topic of discussion today is a sort of fun and controversial one, which is why you should not play Warhammer 40k. Yesterday I, of course, did why you should play Warhammer and listed all the things I could think of that make it fun, I enjoy about it, the reasons I play it. And I do play 40k, so this is kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek and a little bit hypocritical. But I also live in Portland and people here love to say, don't move here. So I guess so we can enjoy it ourselves. But let's take a look at the model and then we'll get into the discussion. So the Astropath that I'm going to be painting today is actually a Rogue Trader model, a really old one, I'm pretty sure. And interestingly, it's actually scale is pretty large. Problem you have with a lot of the Rogue Trader models is they're kind of small. Oh, I don't have the video looping. One second. There we go. So this model's on a 32mm base, and you can see he's pretty, fills up the base pretty well. I think he's about as tall as a Primaris Space Marine almost. And he's wielding a las pistol, which is what I wanted for my Astropath. I'm actually planning to paint 3 of these guys. And this is the first one I picked up, and it's going to be the first one I paint. And he's really an interesting model. Let's take a closer look. Gonna go ahead and switch to the painting cam here, and hoping this works. I had everything all set up a minute ago, I swear. Just gonna try and fix my OBS droid cam. Should be working. Hey, alright, we're live with video. I'm going to zoom in on the miniature so you can see him a bit better here. So this is the Astropath. I had him primed black, and I did spray some white primer from above to try and get the base gray. I have some red gravel glued to the base, and I didn't want to be starting from red on the base. But this guy is quite interesting. If you look at his legs, you can see he's wearing like some tights that have kind of like the open binding down the side. Not sure exactly what to call that. Little windows to his leg, I assume. And over on the other side you can see some stitches on his upper leg. And he has some very interesting shoes. It looks like he has a buckle on this left shoe. And on the right shoe it looks almost like, I don't know, like it's tied with a knot or something, or is that a more complex kind of buckle? So part of the challenge with this miniature is simply figuring out what I'm looking at to paint him. And you see he has kind of a medieval tunic with the sort of strappy sleeves and lots of buttons up his front of his vest and down his sleeves. And he has some shoulder pads with some kind of arcane symbols on them. There's a closer look at his weapon, his las pistol. And of course his face, can't skip over that. He has kind of like a alien looking face, which is going to be good for my Genestealer cult I'll be using him with. And His eyes are so big, I definitely want to take the time to paint them for once. I do paint eyes on a lot of my miniatures, but I haven't been doing it on stream just because, yeah, I've been trying to wrap it up pretty quick. I really need my coffee today. I worked about 8 hours of construction, mounting gutters. Really good exercise, but I am feeling pretty tired, and I've got the day off tomorrow, so I can drink coffee, stay up late. I'll try, we'll see. All right, so I do want to go ahead and get right to painting on this guy, and we can talk about why you shouldn't play Warhammer. So I'll be starting out with a larger brush to do some gray paint on the base. This is a Pagoda brush made in China, number 4, and this one's been serving me really well. I don't treat my brushes that great, and this one just takes it and keeps on trucking. So we're going to be starting with Administratum Gray on the base. Since work went long today and then I made dinner, I didn't have a lot of time to get everything prepared today, so my paints are a mess. You can see I had some trouble with my camera, but I'm happy to be here. Happy to be painting on stream. Love painting Warhammer. And I've been looking forward to talking about this topic too. I'll get into why a little later. I guess I'll just mention the other thing I did today, a couple other pieces of news. I got some miniatures in the mail. For the first time for my Gene Stealer cults, I ordered some aberrants. Aberrants are like a heavy assault melee unit, and these were pre-assembled by somebody. Sold secondhand on eBay, got a pretty decent deal. Saved some money off of retail. Trying to get the paint really thick on this base because I want the gravel to kind of blend into the rest of the base a little bit, and the thick paint will kind of do that as it dries. So I'm excited about those aberrants. And the other thing I did today after work, actually, well, I guess I started before work, is I made sourdough bread. I try to make bread about once a week. Something I learned during the pandemic when I was stuck at home. I thought maybe I'll try to learn how to make bread because it takes a lot of time at home, and that's something I have. It's been super fun. Learned how to make sourdough bread, pizza dough, flatbread, English muffins, all from the same sourdough starter ingredient. Yesterday I did a better job at keeping my miniature on cam. I'm going to try and keep up that trend. And the bread came out great. One of the nice things, it has hardly any ingredients, just flour, sourdough starter, salt, and water. That's it. And the sourdough starter is pretty much just flour and water and thyme, but it forms into like a yeast, so sourdough starter takes the place of yeast in any sourdough recipe. All right, we're knocking out the base pretty quick. Let's get into the topic. I'm sure you guys could probably guess what the first reason I'm going to mention not to play Warhammer, and it's one that's really applicable to me, I have to say, and that is the cost. Obviously, someone like who's got plenty of money to spend and is not at all worried about money, it's not going to be an issue. But for most of us, money is a pretty big deal, and there's places that we know we should be spending it that don't include Warhammer. Personally, I'll just open up about the fact that I have racked up some credit card debt since I bought my own condo, and I think the first thing that I charged that I didn't pay off right away was getting the flooring installed or replaced. There was some really ratty carpet and linoleum, and I put in some sort of faux wood floors. And then my condo payments went up a lot because they installed new siding, which they had not saved any money for. They had a vote on it. I voted no, but I was overruled, so that was a big increase to my monthly expenditures. And I also switched to a job that didn't pay as well. I was working as a restaurant manager, making really good money, and I moved over to the hotel attached to the restaurant, which was a nicer job, less stress, but also less hours and pay. So where am I going with all this is that I probably myself can't really afford to be collecting Warhammer right now. I definitely should be putting all my money to paying off that credit card before I spend any money on entertainment, honestly. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who plays Warhammer and spends money on Warhammer regularly, even, who can't really afford it. And it can be a pretty expensive hobby. As time goes by, you tend to collect more and more factions, and then it's easy to continue picking up new models for all of those factions. And I don't want to think about how much I've spent on Warhammer, but maybe I'll ballpark it at between $1,000 and $2,000 on this hobby. I mean, granted, this is since 1995, but maybe closer to $2,000 on a hobby over 20 years is maybe not so bad. But if you a lot of people just get into Warhammer and go wild buying miniatures. I have a friend who started 40k who's already on his third faction in probably 3 years. So it's easy to go wild spending money, and if you can't afford it, that's a reason not to play Warhammer. Okay, we got the base done. What do I want to do next? I was thinking of doing his tunic black, his pants gray, so let's go ahead and do the pants. I suppose I have the gray paint out, but I do want to switch to a medium brush. So the models themselves are expensive, but I suppose there's some caveats here, which is nowadays you can enjoy the actual game of Warhammer without buying models by playing the game on Tabletop Simulator. And I know a lot of people are enjoying the game that way, especially during the pandemic when it's best not to meet face-to-face because of the risk of spreading the virus. Although at this point, I think I do get the impression that the vaccine manufacturers have given up on ever defeating it, and maybe they're not the only ones. But Tabletop Simulator is a board game simulator video game on computer, and it lets you play Warhammer using basically prepared models that other users have created or submitted, which I think many of them are scans of actual models, painted miniatures. And so you aren't necessarily going to be able to customize your army exactly the colors you want. You'll have to use the models that you can find available. But they do at least seem to have most of the major like Space Marine factions like Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Ultramarines, etc. So there is definitely some customization available with that. And there are other ways to get models that aren't quite as expensive, like buying secondhand on eBay or at a local shop, or trades or third-party models. I guess I don't want to go gray here, actually. So just his pants, and I think we're just about done there. They were kind of gray to begin with from the primer. So there are some ways to get in a little bit cheaper into the hobby, but the miniatures are expensive. in that you might pay $55 for a box with 3 or 5 miniatures in it, so it can be pretty spendy. And then, of course, you have to paint the miniatures yourself. Not everybody's going to be into that. And you could buy pre-painted miniatures. You could hire a painting service, but those also tend to increase your costs. I think now maybe let's base coat his hands and face. I'm going to be using Screamer Pink, which I do for my Genestealer Cults characters. Giving them all the same flesh tone helps kind of unify the army, and it gives them a sort of bright pink skin, which I think has a little bit of a kind of an alien look to it, which I enjoy. So you do have to paint the miniatures. That seemed to surprise Graham Norton when he was interviewing Henry Cavill. He seems like the kind of person who would hire a painting service. If I could just miss the eyes with this coat, that would almost make them look already painted. Let's zoom in so you guys can see. So again, you're going to be buying paints, brushes, probably something to hold your brushes, and those costs continue. Paint is the most recent thing I bought that's Warhammer related. Had to go buy some paint yesterday. Sounds like somebody's doing some construction outside. It's 7:30 at night and it's dark out, so I don't know why the construction crews would still be going. But hope that's not too bothersome. Maybe you guys can't even hear it. I don't know. So you do have to paint the models or get them painted. I suppose you don't have to if you're just playing at home with your family member or whatever. Maybe you guys are fine using unpainted models, but take some time to assemble them. Wow, that noise outside is pretty annoying. I'm gonna pour myself some more coffee. I was really hoping they would wrap up this construction soon because I knew it was going to impact my live stream battle reports I want to do. And I have made some progress in terms of battle reports. I've got some people who are interested in playing. And I think I have a game on schedule now, coming up on maybe a Friday or Saturday. So, another reason you might not want to play Warhammer is that you do have to find someone else who plays. Assuming you're planning to play on the tabletop with miniatures, it's not necessarily easy to find players everywhere you may go. If you're in a foreign country or the middle of nowhere, there might not be a hobby shop and other local players for you that are easy to find. Or there might be one other player and you don't get along with him. So you do kind of need a group of people who play, ideally. And if you are looking for a solo activity, you could paint miniatures, you could paint the models, you could collect, and you could read the books. But it's really sort of a multi-person game, and you not only usually need someone to play against, you ideally want someone else who's willing to collect and paint miniatures, so they have their own force. Although, you know, you could loan out an army or have two armies and invite people over to play, but it takes so long to learn how to play the game that people who don't collect it usually aren't motivated enough. Another thing about Warhammer 40k, which sometimes rubs me the wrong way, especially when you're first starting out, it can seem not very fair, is that a lot of times to adapt your strategy, like say you're always getting beaten by a particular player, in order to adapt your strategy, you often need to buy more models. So say in my case, I tended to start out collecting pretty much only infantry, and I was a Space Marine player. And at one point I played several games, maybe 10 games at a local hobby shop against a player who was new to the game but very cunning in terms of his strategy, and also thought a lot about what models he wanted to collect before he started, and really set out to collect models that would win him games. So I felt like I was kind of collecting models for fun, models that I liked, or that kind of thing. And I felt like he sort of, by collecting models that would be effective in the game, really had an edge against me. And the matchup that we had was he was playing Tau. This was a few editions ago, when they had just introduced allies, so you could bring two factions and play them together on the table as allies. And so he was playing Tau and Space Wolves together. So he would have a gun line of Tau models, usually crisis suits with 3 plasma guns on each one, and he would charge up the board with some Thunderwolf cavalry. It was very hard to beat him, and I played kind of a shooty style of Dark Angels, and usually I could not outshoot the Tau. It's almost like every shot he would fire I would get no armor save against, and his models could shoot and then back up so that they were out of range when my turn would come, and I, even moving forward, often wouldn't be able to return fire at all. And using these kind of strategies, he beat me 9 games out of 10. I got 1 draw against him. So if you really want to turn the tables on someone in that kind of situation, you can buy new models that will be more competitive against that particular person. But again, you're spending money to try and win the game, which is something that kind of bugs me sometimes. But it's a feature of Warhammer. And then besides just wanting to collect new models or wanting to adapt to other people and buying models to sort of adapt your strategy, well, I guess I'm actually done with this color. Let's rinse the brush. There's also constantly new rulebooks coming out. Games Workshop will generally come out with a rulebook, like an update to the game rules every maybe 2 to 3 years, and they will usually be updating each faction's rulebook or codex maybe every 3 years or so. So even if you are happy with your collection, you collected a 2,000 point army and you're planning to just keep it the same forever, new books are going to come out, and you're going to need to buy books to stay current. And also, Games Workshop will change the point values of the models. So your 2,000 point army may suddenly become 1,800 points after a new codex comes out. So if you're trying to just play 2,000 point games, now you need to buy more models because, you know, they've played with how many points each model's worth. So Games Workshop is always going to try to stay in business by giving you reasons to buy stuff from them, and in some cases they kind of force you to, like with new rulebooks and codexes. Players who have been in the hobby for a long time don't really get too bothered about that. They're usually happy when they have some attention given to the faction that they play, and they don't mind shelling out a few bucks for a new codex. But if you're not in the hobby, it's something to be aware of. So besides having to stay current on rulebooks and update your collection by buying new miniatures, you also need a bunch of other stuff to play the game, which all costs money, like dice, terrain for your tabletop, and of course you can get by without a lot of this stuff. You could use a dice rolling app that's free on your cell phone. You could use stacks of books or styrofoam packing material in place of terrain. So it's not like you're forced to spend money on this stuff, but playing the game does kind of sort of lend itself to collecting these other things like dice, terrain, carrying cases, probably a display case for your miniatures. So the costs can really add up. I built my own display case. I will do an episode at some point where I show that off, but I'm very proud of it, and I use it kind of as decoration for my condo. I have my Dungeons and Dragons collection in one case in the living room, and I have my Warhammer collection in a case in the dining room. And I built kind of like a 10-foot long shelf with 3 shelves, sliding plexiglass front, and LED lights, color changing LED lights to show off the miniatures. So it costs me, even building it myself, it cost me probably $350 in terms of raw materials, and I know those kind of raw materials have gotten more expensive during this time. Alright, making pretty good progress on this guy. I'm painting his tunic black, and then I will do probably a brown wash on his tights or leggings. I can't tell if he's holding something in his hand. I suppose no one will ever see the underside of it while we're playing the game, so I don't need to worry too much about that. So that's the first reason not to play Warhammer, the cost. And it does add up. And especially if you're in debt, or you haven't got any savings, haven't started saving for retirement. I mean, there's probably lots of things that are more important that you could be spending your money on than Warhammer. And so that's the first thing to consider. And probably most people would say that's the main reason not to play the game, but I did think of a few others. So we'll be going through those in a minute. All right. Almost done with this color. I think I just have to hit the bottom of his tunic here. Looks like he has a little equipment pack or a little belt pouch or something on the back here. So other reasons to think twice before getting into Warhammer. One reason not to play would be you're not a competitive person. Warhammer is a game with a winner and a loser every time you get to the table, and a lot of people who play the game are quite into winning or quite competitive. And now at this point, they even have classes you can take on becoming a better Warhammer player that people are willing to pay to have coaches advise them, or study with a trainer to get better at the game. And if you're really turned off by that kind of competitive environment, it's not how everyone plays the game, but it is a competitive game, or it certainly can be. And if you are really not into anything competitive, that would maybe be a reason not to play. And on the flip side, if you are... Oh, I see what that is. It's part of his tunic under his hand. And on the flip side, if you are overly competitive, Warhammer might not be the game for you, in that like if you can't lose and still be a good sport, for instance, then people are not going to enjoy playing Warhammer against you. If you tend to fly into a rage as soon as something doesn't go your way, you may find yourself kicked out of your local hobby club for bad sportsmanship, or for always causing problems. So if you're too competitive, not competitive. Also, Warhammer is a dice game. Even if you have the perfect strategy, you do have to actually roll the dice to win. And there is a luck and chance factor involved. Granted, there's a lot of strategy, and usually the better player will win, but it won't always be the case. The dice can turn against you, and the whole idea of rolling dice and having random chance be a factor in the game, some people may not be into that. Maybe you'd rather play something like chess or Go, where there's no random chance, just the decisions of the two players. And I'm sure some people think that any game that involves rolling dice is kind of like a form of gambling and wouldn't want to play it for that reason. But I don't know about that. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing games that involve dice. I mean, most Americans grew up playing games like Monopoly or what else that involve rolling dice. And I mean, it's all pretty harmless, but there is that. If you're looking for a game that's purely strategy, then you may be annoyed at the fact that the dice will often determine, especially in a close game where the two players are pretty evenly matched, it'll often come down to the dice rolls. All right, well, I guess we're done with black. Let's see. I haven't really decided what color I want to do his shoulder pads. I thought about painting them black, but now I'm not so sure. I was going to do his buttons and probably his upper sleeves gold. I could go gold on his shoulder pads. And also, what color do I want to do his shoes? He does seem to have shoes on. Or does he? It's actually quite hard to tell. I'm going to zoom in on his feet so you guys can see what I'm talking about there. Is he wearing shoes? It almost looks like the shoe starts like right here. See that little line there? Very weird. Let's look at the other foot. It almost looks like the feet are a continuation of his tights, but with a little buckle on it or something. Very strange. How do I want to do that? There doesn't seem to be any line around the back of his ankle or heel that indicates a shoe. Well, should it be all tights all the way down his feet and then with just kind of like a buckle on it? I really can't decide. Or should he have some kind of shoe? Well, maybe I'll just say it's all tights. It's already painted gray, so I don't have to do anything in that regard. Oh, I know what I missed. Painting his skin poking through those little holes in his tights. Let's do that. So, reasons not to play Warhammer. Another one is it consumes a lot of time. If you only have one day off a month to do something fun with your friends and you're a Warhammer player, that's probably how you're going to want to spend that one day. Instead of maybe going to the beach or the mountains or camping or whatever else. And if you don't have a lot of free time, you probably want to treat it like it's pretty valuable. I think Warhammer's fun and a fun way to spend that free time, but between painting miniatures, playing the game, and all the time I spend thinking and reading about the game or watching content on YouTube, it really is almost like my main recreational activity. And so that's another reason not to play Warhammer, is it takes a lot of time. All right, there we go. A little bit of pink in there. And I suppose this is kind of related to that last point, but you know, it distracts you from everything else that's going on in your life. Like you might be spending time painting Warhammer miniatures when you might have gone to visit your parents or something instead. So we all have a lot of ways we could use our time that would be valuable to us. And you may want to think about, is Warhammer really how I want to be spending my time? Well, what do I want to do on those shoulder pads? I'm thinking maybe I'll paint gold on his upper sleeves first, so I see how that looks before I decide. Or what? Thinking. Maybe I'll come in and paint his gun black next. That's something I am pretty sure I want to do. I don't think there's much else to say about Warhammer taking up a lot of time or distracting from the rest of your life. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Warhammer is also kind of a niche hobby. If you're moving to a new city and starting with a whole bunch of new coworkers, there's a chance that one of them is going to be into Warhammer, but I would say it's not a really good chance. At the restaurant where I worked, no one else played Warhammer. At the hotel where I work, no one else plays Warhammer. So it's not like a super mainstream hobby. It does seem to be becoming more mainstream, but partly because, you know, it takes so much time, it takes money. You have to have probably heard about it in the first place and wanted to be involved in it, and this kind of thing has to appeal to you. It's not really I don't know if it really has super mainstream appeal. Certainly here on Twitch, there's not as many Warhammer streams as there are for video games, for instance. I would say you have a better chance of meeting other people who play video games than you do Warhammer. Though it sure always is fun when you meet someone else who's into it. But it is kind of a niche game. There's probably more people in the world who play chess than Warhammer. Although, I don't know, maybe that's debatable. It's also a science fiction fantasy, kind of like Star Wars. And fantasy is not everybody's cup of tea. Even if you're going to be playing a miniatures game, some people would rather play something inspired by the real world, like World War II or historical, Julius Caesar type game, just because it feels like it's more relevant to the real world than a totally created from scratch fantasy world set 40,000 years in the future, which is got lots of wacky, crazy stuff in it, like demons from another dimension, or blue fish aliens in Gundam suits, what have you. Hey, he's already starting to look like something. What color should I do this pelt on his back? I did think about maybe doing it white, like a, piece of polar bear fleece or something. Thought about doing it brown. I don't think I want to paint it black because he's got enough black on his torso. Guess I'll keep thinking about that. Maybe I'll jump onto gold next. That was one color I was pretty sure I wanted to use. I'm going to be using my favorite gold, Retributor Armor here. It's a base paint, and I highly recommend it if you've been having trouble with your gold paint. Probably a job for the small brush now. Warhammer 40k is also a very violent game, and I know not everybody is into violence. Some people absolutely can't stand it. even in movies and TV and so forth, and don't want their kids engaging in anything violent. I'm not one of those people, but when you play the game of Warhammer, pretty much your goal is to kill the other player's army and remove all their models from the table. And generally you get happy and cheer when you destroy one of the enemy player's models or units, and you're rewarded with sometimes with points in the game, depending on your secondary objectives or whatever else. And the Warhammer universe that's described in the books and so forth is also incredibly violent, and most of the books are focused on Space Marines or Imperial Guard, and more or less military activity. And some people kind of look at Warhammer as almost like some kind of military indoctrination for kids, to sort of make them think about military strategy and weapons and killing and the military. I don't know if well, I mean, I was going to say I don't know if I agree, but I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with the fact that Warhammer is focused on violence and military activity. It's kind of obvious. And that's not for everybody. And as far as like a fantasy world to spend your time in, the grimdark 41st millennium can be sort of a dark place. I don't think that it is like a big downer for the fans of the game, but if you pick up a Warhammer novel and it seems like there's nothing good happening and no good guys, and I could understand if you walked away from it not really interested in playing the game, if that's not your cup of tea anyway. Trying to just hit these little gold buttons, but I'm probably missing some spots here and there. It's pretty small details. And now I'm doing the gold on his upper sleeves. I wonder what you call these. I might have seen the name of it at one point. These sort of strappy upper sleeves. It's sort of a Renaissance thing. I do like how they, at least in some of the Rogue Trader stuff, had sort of a mix of Renaissance garb kind of mixed in with the Imperium stuff. Although I maybe don't see it too often, but this model is one example. Another reason that you might not want Warhammer to be your main hobby is that when you're doing your Warhammer hobby, you're not getting any exercise. And it can be kind of hard on your eyes painting models, you know, squinting at something close up. A lot of people use magnifying glasses or other ways of seeing the model better. But compared to, you know, spending your time playing soccer or jogging or something like that, if health is important to you, or if you're struggling to stay healthy or get exercise, spending a ton of time playing Warhammer is not, or painting miniatures is not really going to help you in that regard. And that might be something to think about. Oh, I like how that looks. There you can see. All right, let's do his other sleeve. What else? Whoa. This next one does pain me. And it did hurt. So, one reason not to play Warhammer is to look at what happened to the original Warhammer. And I am talking about Warhammer Fantasy. Warhammer Fantasy Battles, also known as just Warhammer. Before Warhammer 40k was called Warhammer, they're kind of dropping the 40,000 for the most part these days. Like if you go to a Warhammer store in England, it used to be called a Games Workshop store. Now it just says Warhammer above the door. And of course that refers to Warhammer 40,000. But 15 years ago, it would have made you think Warhammer Fantasy. Back in those days, there was Warhammer Fantasy, which people just called Warhammer, and then there was Warhammer 40k, which, you know, you'd call 40k to differentiate it from Warhammer Fantasy. And what happened to Warhammer Fantasy? Games Workshop totally discontinued it. Why? There have been a lot of theories, and I don't know if Games Workshop has absolutely said what their reasoning was, or I don't know if I would even totally take their word for it if they publicly said why they did it. Some people think it's because the Warhammer community, that is the players who played Warhammer, were getting kind of older, and you know, there were people who had been playing Warhammer Fantasy since maybe the late 80s or early 90s, and in 2015, I'm sorry, what year, in the early 2000s, I guess, I can't remember when they phased it out. Was it like around 2010? Anyway, I think maybe felt like the Warhammer players were kind of becoming like old men, and they didn't really want those people representing the game or representing them as a company. I can't exactly say why. Or maybe they just wanted to totally change the game and become more like War Machine and Hordes that were played with round bases instead of square. So Warhammer Fantasy was a fantasy game, fantasy battle game, you know, heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings, where you could collect an army of elves or dwarves or orcs or goblins or what have you. And the units, the soldiers would fight in blocks of troops, and the square bases would let them stack up next to each other in rank and file, and you would move your units around like as a group. And basically, when Games Workshop discontinued Warhammer Fantasy and sort of replaced it with Age of Sigmar, all of those models that people had collected sort of became obsolete. And they wanted you to buy and collect a brand new army of new miniatures. And that's the Age of Sigmar game. And that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, including myself. I had a couple, maybe a few Warhammer armies. I collected Dark Elves, that was my main army. And I also had some dwarves, and my brother gave me a army of goblins that he picked up on eBay. So I guess I had like 3 armies. Oh, I also had some Bretonnians. They came in a box set, and I had added to that collection that came in the box set somewhat too. So maybe I had like 4 armies of Warhammer Fantasy. And to have Games Workshop say, well, that game's not going to be supported anymore, it kind of almost seemed like it kind of dissolved the community of players. That once the game wasn't officially supported anymore, people, including myself, didn't really want to play it. And that could happen with Warhammer 40,000 as well. At least we assume so, because it happened to Warhammer Fantasy. So there is that possibility, kind of that threat hanging over the community, that at any time Games Workshop might decide that you aren't buying enough, or the community isn't buying enough models, and they need to make all the models obsolete and start a brand new game. And I don't know if I mean, some people would probably say, well, that's never going to happen. Warhammer's 40k is too popular. Uh, it's doing too well. It's too successful for them to do that. But it does seem like a possibility, and the fact that they've done it before might be a reason you stay away from Warhammer 40k and don't trust Games Workshop to continue supporting their games indefinitely into the future. Now, I will say, of course, nothing really stops you from playing a discontinued game or an older edition of the rules, or for that matter, playing with your old codex or something like that, at least in a casual game against, friends or family or something like that. But nevertheless, they have discontinued a popular game before and replaced it, and that could happen with Warhammer 40k at some point, in which case you would expect to see the models lose most of their resale value, I suspect. So that would just be something to be aware of, and maybe it might be a reason that you don't want to play a Games Workshop game, but obviously it's not stopped me, and I was hit pretty hard by the ending of Warhammer Fantasy. I suppose it did affect me to the point that I did not want to collect Age of Sigmar. I was kind of bitter about having my Warhammer Fantasy armies phased out, and so I just didn't want to turn around and give them a ton of money for doing that. And it gave me enough of a bad taste in my mouth that I stayed away from Age of Sigmar. This next one is kind of a joke, but Warhammer is manufactured in England. Games Workshop is in Nottingham, England. And so a lot of the profits from sales of the miniatures and rulebooks and all the rest of it ends up going to a company in England. So if you don't happen to live in England, you are paying for imports, and some of this money that you're spending is traveling overseas to another country and maybe not being spent on products from your home country. So if you are interested in helping your own local economy, whether it's companies in your country or in your city or your region, you may not want to be giving your money to Games Workshop unless you live in England. Just a thought. One potential reason you might not want to play Warhammer. Now I'm going to be mixing a pink to paint a highlight on his skin tones. Probably going to go back to my medium brush just to make this go a little faster. I want to make sure to get the white on my brush first. Using White Scar and the Screamer Pink. And I guess kind of going along with that, Warhammer 40k is owned by Games Workshop, and so you always do want to think about who you're giving your money to, and I know some people are not a fan of the company, and you may not want to give your money to that company. Whether you feel like they are always squeezing too much money out of their players, or making things more expensive than they need to be, or making arbitrary changes to the game that don't help the fans. Whatever it is, if you don't like the company, you may not want to give your money to them for that reason. Now, I am someone who actually likes Games Workshop as a company. There's all kinds of opinions on this, but I feel like they're a company that actually does listen to their fans. I have been playing Warhammer 40k since the 90s, and a lot of the things that people were crying out for over the years, Games Workshop has eventually done. I know for like one example, they had created the faction Sisters of Battle, or Adeptus Sororitas, and yet the models for that faction were outdated for a long time, in that they used to produce metal models for all the different ranges, and Sisters of Battle was one of the last factions to get updated to plastic, and players were crying out for that for a long time. I remember tons of times seeing people say, when are we going to get plastic Sisters of Battle? And eventually they did. So I do feel like Games Workshop does listen. It sometimes takes them a while to respond. But personally, I feel like they're pretty responsive to what they think the fans want. And I've been happy to see a lot of the new factions that have come out for the game in the last 10 or 15 years, like Imperial Knights and Genestealer Cult, Sisters of Battle are some of the more recent ones that have been added to the game. But if you don't like the company, you may not want to give them your money. You might look at other miniatures games, like Infinity is a miniatures game, I think, manufactured in Italy. And what miniatures games do we have manufactured here in America? I'm very curious to hear if you guys know of any. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I really wonder, are there any miniatures games being manufactured in my local area? I'm pretty sure I've seen a miniatures company operating out of maybe Seattle or British Columbia in Canada, and that's kind of my neck of the woods. I'm not too far away from California or the Bay Area. Are there any games being manufactured down there? I don't know of any, but I would be curious if you guys know of any. I have thought about making my own miniatures games, actually. I'm trained as a 3D artist. I studied animation, and I have since learned how to make 3D models for 3D printing. And something I would really love to do is make some games, 3D printable games. And being a big Warhammer fan, I have definitely considered the possibility of making like a 3D printable strategy, tabletop strategy war game of my own. Maybe based on something like a post-apocalyptic scenario. But yeah, I haven't quite bit the bullet yet or found the right collaborators for that. And I have seen some very inspiring 3D printed work on Facebook recently that has got me thinking about it. All right, well, there's a highlight done on this guy, on the Astropath. Let me think. What color do I want to do those shoulder pads? Black shirt, gold trim. I'm thinking gold, but then what color am I going to paint his the symbols on him? So maybe I'll actually go black on the shoulder pads and gold on the symbols. I think that would be probably better. So switching back to black here. Or shall I do the gold first? I think it'd be easier to start with black. So the fact that Warhammer is manufactured in England and the money goes to Games Workshop might be a reason that you don't want to play it. Doesn't really bother me. I have a brother who lives in England. I've got nothing but good feelings toward the English people. And I love this product that they make. World-class miniatures game. The most popular miniatures game in the world, I would say. Am I still on cam? Okay. But it's something to think about. I will just mention that as far as Games Workshop and their intellectual property, they have been rather heavy-handed with controlling it, like filing lawsuits against other people who use the word or the name Space Marine in their creative work, even though Games Workshop were not the first ones to use the term. And I always think that's pretty low when you try to copyright a term that you stole from someone else and then stop anyone else from using it. It's like, really? I saw he has some more buttons down here on the bottom of his tunic that I haven't painted yet. This one here is hard to get to. There we go. But moving on, or I guess this is kind of related, there are a lot of other games you could be playing besides Warhammer. It may be the most popular, and with a niche hobby like this, playing the most popular one is a reason a lot of people are into it, because if you're going to play a miniatures game, you have the best chance of finding other Warhammer players as opposed to something else like Malifaux or Infinity or whatever else. X-Wing, HeroClix. Those are both popular though. But anyway, you know, there are a lot of other great games that you could try. So Warhammer does tend to become kind of like an all-consuming game in that there's so much involved in it that if you're going to do a hobby game type thing and you play Warhammer, that's probably your go-to. And Warhammer players, often it's the only miniatures game they collect just because it sort of sucks up all their hobby energy. But by spending your hobby energy on Warhammer, you may be missing out on a lot of other great games, and you won't even know it. So that's something. I want to paint the rim of his base black, but I think I'll wait till the very end for that, just because this is where I tend to handle the model, and if I paint it black while I'm still working, I'll end up forgetting and getting paint all over my fingers. So we'll do that very last. I'm actually pretty happy with how his base looks. Just this solid gray paint is all I'm planning to do there. Thinking maybe I'll paint a brown on the pelt on his back so that we just have like another color on the miniature. That sounds good to me. Maybe I'll try this new brown I got. Golthor brown. Gorthor. Seemed like a nice color. Kind of like almost army boot brown, I guess. I want my medium brush. We're just going to try and paint around these gold buttons I've already done. What was I going to say next? A lot of other great games. This next one is kind of a joke, but it may be a reason not to play Warhammer 40k for some people. And that's that it's kind of nerdy. You know, the idea of, you know, I mean, we laugh about it. Like, you know, we recently had Henry Cavill interviewed by Graham Norton on his show. And Graham was kind of poking fun at him for painting miniatures and inviting people to his house to play fantasy battles. It's, you know, it seems kind of nerdy to a lot of people, and rightly so. I mean, I'd say it is. The idea of, you know, that most Warhammer players could rattle on about the world and the miniatures and the Primarchs and the rules for hours on end doesn't necessarily make us look cool to people who are not into it and don't get it. And it is becoming more mainstream, but if maybe you already have issues with feeling like you're not cool or you're a nerd and you are trying to specifically change that, playing Warhammer might not help. Henry Cavill, of course, has the advantage of being a successful, you know, film and TV star, big, good-looking guy who's muscular and, you know, takes time to work out. And someone like that, you know, is already going to have pretty good confidence and can kind of do whatever he wants without really having to feel embarrassed or ashamed. And I don't think anyone should feel embarrassed or ashamed about playing Warhammer or being into it. But, you know, you may look like kind of a nerd to some people. It's something to think about if that is something you care about. And it could be a reason some people wouldn't want to play the game. Just the idea of spending your free time painting little model soldiers, I mean, some people would not be impressed by that. And who cares about those people? That's how I feel. Who cares? But it's a nerdy hobby. That's all right with me. When I was in high school, I guess I was kind of worried about being a nerd. And I had a friend who played Dungeons and Dragons with me, and he wasn't shy about it at all. And he was very popular. And so, you know, we've all kind of seen those people who rise above it or aren't bothered by it, and people think they're cool even though they do nerdy stuff. And the whole idea of not wanting to be a nerd is kind of, I don't know, kind of funny. But there's that. And there is a ton of information involved in Warhammer. Being able to play the game well, you kind of want to know what your opponent's army can do. And if you play at tournaments, you kind of need to know what all the armies can do. And that means you're kind of trying to absorb the information that's in not just the main rulebook and your faction codex, but probably all the different codex. And you're probably interested in all of the lore of the different armies. And you start to learn the names of the different characters, the 18 Primarchs and the other kind of important characters in the Warhammer setting, like Malkador or Celestine, Abaddon, Aramain, Fabius Bile. It goes on and on. And if you really get into Warhammer, oh, I need to shake this paint. You could spend a lot of time and a lot of brain power learning information which is really useless outside the hobby. Like, you know, when you go to work, you don't need to know any of these characters or any of the, you know, rules or stratagems of 40k armies. It's only useful within the context of the hobby, or as, you know, entertainment. So it's not really like you're picking up a lot of useful information. And if you were like someone who was planning on joining the military and becoming an officer and commanding troops, it's not like I would recommend Warhammer as like the best way to prepare yourself for that either. There's probably better things you could be doing. Even like reading about actual battles from history, for instance. So it's not like the stuff that you're memorizing for Warhammer is really applicable to the rest of your life. And there can be just a staggering amount of information to learn. It can be intimidating for a new player too, feeling like just the game rules themselves are hard to learn or master, much less all of the rules for all of the factions. Well, there I did some little silver details on his pistol, tried to pick out most of the little bumps and gizmos there. Went a little heavy with the silver paint, but not too bad. But if memorizing tons of information or just getting into pile of information like that is daunting or not something you want to bother with, then you might want to stay away from Warhammer for that reason. Is it time to do an ink wash? I think we're just about there. I could probably do a little more of a highlight on his skin. I want to do that now before the ink washes because there will be white paint mixed into it, and that takes a while to dry. And you need white paint to be super dry before you apply any kind of wash to it. As I totally put my white paint into my silver by accident. Pink. Oh, we have a viewer. Welcome to the channel. Today we've been discussing reasons not to play Warhammer in kind of a joking way. Of course, I'm painting a Warhammer model while I'm talking about it, so I'm not super serious, but yesterday was reasons to play Warhammer, so I just thought it would be fun and to talk about the other side. Reasons you might want to stay away from this game or pick a different one. And I'm coming up on the controversial one in a minute. And the next reason I was going to say you might not want to get into Warhammer is it can be quite addictive. Like I was talking earlier about how I've been spending money on my Warhammer hobby when I've got debts I should be paying off. And part of that reason is it can be addictive to buy miniatures. And of course the game kind of promotes it by giving you reasons to add to your collection and always coming out with new models that look cool and tempt you. So if you have kind of an addictive personality, you might want to be careful about getting into Warhammer. There we go. I'm happy with that highlight there. I think we're going to be doing a brown ink wash on his pants next. And I think that's the only place I want to do a brown wash. All right, let's do that. And I guess I will just also say that Warhammer is really just a pastime that's for fun. And spending your time on stuff that's just for fun isn't for everybody either. In that if you're not really thinking about your future, preparing for retirement, helping your family, you know, some people see just spending your money and time as entertainment for yourself is not necessarily worthwhile. So that would be one other reason that you might not want to spend your time and money on a game like Warhammer, is really it's just for fun. And then I think we're about to the last point I wanted to talk about, which is kind of a serious one, and was the one that I was saying might be a little bit controversial. And that is that Warhammer might actually be a form of idolatry. Idolatry being a term that I associate with the Bible. I'm not religious, and I was sort of, culturally exposed to the Bible by living in America. And I don't know how young I was when I heard about the 10 Commandments. And I always kind of looked at it like, well, I'm not religious. I don't know why there would be some intelligent God creating everything, so I probably don't need to take any of this stuff too seriously. And I actually picked up the Bible this last year, kind of as entertainment. I've been getting more into researching religion and mythology and ancient history out of, interest. And so I thought, maybe I should take a look at the Bible. It's certainly culturally and historically important. And there might be some important information there that could help improve my life. So I was reading it mostly at work. I was watching a hotel desk, so I had plenty of free time. And of course, they always have free Bibles at a hotel, usually donated by an organization like the Gideons. And I came across the 10 Commandments in there, and as I was reading them and thinking about, was it the second commandment, of not creating any idols, I saw that it was worded in such a way that it seemed like it could apply to Warhammer. It really says something like, you shouldn't create any images of anything on earth or in heaven or in hell. And so not creating any images of anything on earth or in heaven, I mean, that's pretty broad. And it got me wondering, like, if you're trying to tell people, like, don't kill each other, don't cheat on your, wife or whatever else, why would you include something like, don't create any images? It seemed a bit harsh. And as someone who creates tons of, figurines, spends a lot of his time doing that, it seemed like, does this one apply to me? Does this apply to Warhammer? And I wasn't really affected by it because it was a religious prohibition, not being particularly religious, but the way I was reading the 10 Commandments was like, this is advice for how to survive. And the way that they're sort of presented is like, these are the things that your people should do if you don't want to be spit back out from the land of Israel. You should follow these commandments going forward so that your people can endure and not be wiped out and destroyed, basically. And I thought, well, that's pretty intense. Why would creating images or figurines lead to you being destroyed? And somewhere else, so I did a little bit of research online, and somewhere else I came across something, from another religious source saying something like, engaging in idolatry leads to terror and death. And I thought, well, that's crazy. How could that be? And so, I spent some time thinking about it. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of a sore throat here from all the talking. Pretty tired from working today, doing construction. But some ideas did occur to me. And I'll just kind of illustrate like one example here of how your Warhammer collection hobby could lead to your death. Maybe a few examples. And these are serious examples in that they could really happen, but I'm not trying to say that they would happen to you necessarily. Well, here's my examples. You've got this collection of idols that you care about, and your house catches on fire, and you're trying to save your idols, and you burn up in the fire when you should have just been worried about saving yourself. Obviously, if you have physical possessions that are super important to you, you could prioritize those to such an extent that you're not prioritizing your own survival enough. Another example of that might be, what if there's an economic collapse? And instead of having a bunch of money or survival supplies prepared, you've spent all your money on your Warhammer collection. And in the situation where there's some kind of huge disaster and everybody's competing for the food and medical supplies that they're going to need to survive, your Warhammer models might not be worth anything. Just because in a survival situation, people aren't going to be worried about entertainment as much. And they're not going to be wanting to buy your models off you so that you can afford to buy food or medicine or whatever. Well, I think I'm going to have to go get a little cup of water here in a second. Say hi if you're in the chat. I'll be right back. I'm just going to run get some water. Now, there are plenty of people who would say collecting Warhammer models is not idolatry because you're not worshipping the models. You're not actually attributing any magical powers to them. They're just physical objects that bring you joy, and that's different. But I'm sort of playing devil's advocate is what I'm doing here. So sure, that's one perspective, but I'm simply investigating the idea of, could there be some danger in getting into something like this? Spending your money on Warhammer models. And as I thought more about it, one kind of thing that occurred to me is that in the long run, there's always going to be tough times ahead. We happen to live in a period of time when things have been very stable and prosperous and peaceful. But when you look at the long stretch of history, that's not been universally the situation. Generally, what we see is that these sort of good times that we're living in are interspersed with tough times. Tough times could be natural disasters, famine, drought, migration, war, all the things that preppers worry about. The people who spend all their time and energy getting ready for tough times. And in the long run, it may be that the preppers are the smart ones. And I don't know if you've heard the was a parable, Aesop's fables. Is it a fable of the grasshopper and the ant? The story goes excuse me. The story goes that in the summer, the grasshopper is enjoying the sunny day, eating his fill, and he sees the ant hard at work, gathering food and storing it away. He says, "Why are you doing that? Times are so good. Why don't you just enjoy yourself? Why are you working so hard? That's stupid." And the ant doesn't listen to him and keeps doing what he's doing. And then winter comes, and the grasshopper has nothing to eat. And he begs the ant, "Please, you've got food, give me some." But of course, the ant gathered the food for himself, and in winter, the grasshopper dies, starves. And so that's, you could kind of extrapolate that or interpret that to mean that when times are good, you should be preparing for bad times and hard times. And collecting Warhammer may be kind of like the grasshopper enjoying himself instead of worrying about what he really ought to be worrying about. So that's kind of the idolatry argument as I have come to see it. Not that you're breaking a commandment and you're going to go to hell or be punished by God because you collected Warhammer and you're breaking the commandment, but that the commandment is some sort of generational wisdom telling you something that isn't immediately obvious and kind of a warning to think ahead and a rule to follow that may benefit you. So that's just something to think about. Maybe a reason not to get into Warhammer. There might be better, more important things for you to spend your time and money on that could influence your survival or the survival of your children or future generations. You might be better off investing your money in something that would be highly valuable in hard times, as opposed to Warhammer. Or simply saving your money and being financially ready for hard times if they come. But as long as, times are good, you could, if you did have like a medical emergency, you could probably sell your Warhammer models and get most or sometimes even more money back that way. But it may not be the smartest thing to spend your money on. I can't really say, but that is one other idea I had. And that's my last reason that you might think twice before getting into 40K. You might have more important things to spend your money on if you take the long view, or if you're a really serious person or want to spend your money in a serious way. Well, those were my reasons not to play Warhammer. It's expensive. Games Workshop has some issues. There's other games, other things you could spend your money on. But at the end of the day, I enjoy the hobby. Of course, yesterday my stream was all reasons that you should play Warhammer, so simply the other side of the argument, or the other side to consider. And I thought it would be fun to do a stream on that topic. So what do you think? Should everybody be playing Warhammer, or is it maybe not the best use of money, but still worth it to you? Obviously, I enjoy it enough that I'm willing to spend my money on it. I don't think I'm going to get all my money back by selling my models someday. I don't know if I'm ever going to have kids who are going to want to inherit my Warhammer models. I really just collect them for my own enjoyment and my own pleasure, and to have fun playing the game. But not everybody thinks that having fun is the point of life. Ultimately, it depends on what you find to be important. And I guess maybe that's the great thing about life, is getting to decide how you want to live it. Alright, well, I think I hit the whole edge of that base. Just trying to get the black nice and even across it. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Model's close to done. I do want to do a Karaberg Crimson wash on his skin. And that might be just about the last thing. Oh, I noticed that I never painted his little belt pouch. Hey, we got Mortimer back in. Mortimer says, I think, like all hobbies, if it seems worth it to you, it kind of intrinsically is. Yeah, that's kind of my perspective. If you want to do it, do it. I want to be kind of careful with this wash and not go too heavy, because I have some other washes that are kind of next to it. What are you painting tonight, Mortimer? Are you doing some more hobby time? Are you still working on your flyer for your Imperial Fists? The Fire Raptor? Last night, Mortimer sent me a picture of how his Fire Raptor's coming along. He's got it base coated. At least he's got yellow, black, and silver, I think, painted on it already. Great to see you on stream again, buddy. We had a really fun game of Orcs versus Imperial Fists. Last week? Was that Friday? No, when was that? Saturday, I want to say. I think I might have a game scheduled for this Saturday maybe, but I actually have tomorrow off. Normally I'm doing some construction work on Fridays, but I kind of lucked out and got tomorrow off. So if you do... Oh, okay, so Mortimer says not tonight. Playing some Phoenix Point, an XCOM style game. Oh, that's cool. Sounds like fun. would you believe I have actually more or less phased out video games as far as a way to spend my time. So I can focus more on Warhammer and doing my stream and working and exercising and all that other good stuff. But I've been a big video game player for many years. Some of my favorites are like, I guess recently I've been playing more like 40K games. Some of the last games I was still playing were Deathwing, the 4-player co-op survival game where you're 4 Terminators boarding a Space Hulk. I quite enjoyed that, although some of my friends gave it thumbs down. What I like about it is that it's cooperative. I really enjoy games where the players are kind of incentivized to help each other out, as opposed to competing directly against each other. Because like on the internet, like multiplayer games on the internet, you run into a lot of bad-mannered players. You just want to grief. And I like to play a game that kind of avoids those people. And I was still playing some Dawn of War 2, which is kind of my favorite of the Dawn of War series. And back in the day, I played a ton of Counter-Strike, starting all the way back in college in the year 2000. All right, well, we're really getting there. Almost ready to call this guy finished. Oh, that little belt pouch, I keep forgetting. Let me find my other brown. I think we're gonna do the belt pouch in XV88 brown. I was in a really good mood today after doing 8 hours of construction. So I figured I'd tackle this somewhat negative topic that I've been thinking about. Since I was in a good mood, it wasn't going to be a big downer for me. I'm going to try and use a brush to soak off some of this ink wash around the belt pouch so I don't accidentally have my paint go all over. Probably off camera. There we go. Well, that's getting pretty close to done. I think I'll come back and do the top of his head with a little bit of a pink highlight, then call him done. You having a good day today, Mortimer? How are you doing? Just going to mix up a little pink real quick. All right, there we go. And just gonna hit a couple little spots here. All right, well, I think I might be about done with this astropath. Did I get you into 40K, Mortimer? I kind of feel like it was my fault, but I can't exactly remember. I just know that you got very into 40K very hard once you decided it was for you. And I'm sure glad you did. I've had a ton of fun playing 40K with you and feel like you've become one of my best friends just because we both play so much together. Not a good day, to be honest. Just blowing all my money on a new toy. Oh man, I feel that. I just had some aberrants arrive in the mail today. Here's one with the improvised weapon. And I've got, oh, so many other models on the way. Yeah, I went a little overboard the other night on eBay. Filling came loose. Oh, and a flat tire. Oh, you're having one of those days. Oh, man. Yes, I did get you into tabletop for sure. So, oh, it's all my fault. I was like the video games and lore, but you got me to pull the trigger on getting into the hobby proper. Well, one of the things with 40K is it helps if you know someone else who plays. So I guess I was that person for you who gives you a reason to collect, because then you have someone to play against. And you've actually become, Mortimer's become more of a tournament player than I ever was. I think you've even got a tournament coming up this weekend, maybe? And you just played one a week or two ago where you came in second with your Chaos Knights, I want to say. So that's cool to see you get into the hobby and then in some ways go further than I have. And you've inspired me also to want to get more into tournaments. I'm not quite there yet to where I'm ready to sign up for one. And I'm not quite as motivated during the pandemic, but I definitely have been thinking about it. I think I would be the kind of person who would go to a tournament and just want to have fun, bring my fun, fluffy list, and just see how good I can do with it. Try and play it as well as I can and score well. And I don't see myself winning a tournament, but it would be fun. It'd be more fun if you were there too. It'd be wild to play against each other in a tournament, especially the final round. Now that would be cool. Well, is his base dry enough that I can pick him up? I feel like the Abaddon Black dries pretty fast. Looks like it's okay to handle. So here's how he came out. My Astropath with Las Pistol. Genestealer Cult's Brood Brothers Astropath. He's a Astra Militarum character, but you're allowed to have Astra Militarum characters in Genestealer Cult's army. They do them every other Sunday down here if you're ever free. Pretty chill. Nobody goes super hard. All right. Well, that does sound really fun. I should take you up on that. Every other Sunday. Oh, Sunday's my bad day. I work overnight Saturday night, and then I sleep for 8 hours and then go back to work for another 8 hours on Sunday night. So it's kind of like the whole day is scheduled, unless I could get my work schedule to change. The other thing I've thought about is someday hosting my own tournament. I think it'd be cool if I had, a good property with some nice, maybe like a barn that I could build into like a tournament venue space. I think that would be cool. Thinking about maybe doing a little ink wash around his feet so it kind of looks like he's casting a shadow, but I don't know. Maybe it's not necessary. I think I'm pretty happy with him. His eyes are just white, but I think that works for kind of like a psyker. He's got some kind of magical energy. I'm trying to get to focus on him without much luck here. But anyway, you can see. And I don't know, I was thinking maybe he needed some cleanup on his gold upper sleeves, but they don't look too bad. Zoom out a bit. All right, well, let's take a look at where we started here. Going back to the before cam here. So this was the model as it came, unpainted. This was how I got him off of eBay. And I'm just going to set up my little model spinner so you can see the after. Feeling good as the coffee is kicked in. I drank about half a French press of coffee while I was painting this miniature. Definitely needed a pick-me-up because I was so tired after work. Alright. This is always fun for me to show off the finished model spinning on my little spinner. This thing was not too expensive. I think it was like 15 bucks maybe off Amazon. Always hard to get the camera angled just right though. That should be good. Spinning. Decided to go with the pants. Mortimer, I was telling him about this guy and that it kind of looked like, he had tights or whatever. Mortimer said I should paint him like he's just got no pants on at all. Let's see if I can get this to focus. little lower here. Well, alright, here's my finished Astropath, Genestealer Cult's Astropath. He's not well lit. Let's move my light a bit. That's a little better. There we go. Alright, well here's the finished model. I'm happy with him. Pretty straightforward speed paint job. But it works. And now I can get him on the table. I did paint the Astropath, or I did actually buy 3 of them, inspired by the YouTube channel Auspex Tactics. He did a episode on the Astropath as potentially the best value for your points in terms of models in the game. I think he's under 50 points and he can cast a Psychic Power. And there's a couple good options. Obviously Smite, the one that lets you put some mortal wounds on a target. But also there's one that can boost your save, and another good one too, which I forget at the moment. But yeah, we'll have to see if he can achieve anything on the table. Hopefully we'll get him in a game before too long. Anyway, thanks for joining me in the stream, Mortimer. Super appreciate you stopping in again. And look forward to seeing your Fire Raptor get finished as well. And I will be doing one more stream tomorrow, unless maybe you come up and play a game. I don't know if I actually asked you if you want to come play Warhammer tomorrow. You're probably working. You have a good night too. And I'm definitely looking forward to a day off tomorrow. Planning to do a painting stream at 7 p.m. And what am I going to be painting tomorrow? Probably a Psyker. Oh yeah, you've got stuff to do. Well, I understand. You have a good night, Mortimer, and until next time.